all, I'm Clara. This is a Yom Kippur primer, especially for people who might be wondering, what do I say as a greeting on Yom Kippur? The short answer is that typically people do not say have a fun Yom Kippur or happy Yom Kippur. This would definitely be very kind and well-intentioned, and I personally have appreciated the sentiment, but Yom Kippur is broadly considered the holiest day of the Jewish year. It's a very complex holiday and many people fast. So it's not so much a happy celebratory tone. So for example, instead of saying I celebrate Yom Kippur, people will say I observe Yom Kippur. And what you can say instead, if you're not Jewish, might be something like have a good Yom Kippur, or I hope you have a meaningful Yom Kippur. Or if you're feeling more connected, or if you're Jewish, the typical greeting is Gamar Chatima Tova, which means may you be sealed in the book of life. We'll get into this in a little bit about what all this means. And if you know someone is fasting, you can say, hope you have an easy fast. I am now going to transition into a more full primer on Yom Kippur as well as Rosh Hashanah. These two holidays go together. This is the second one of these I've done. This is going to be a little bit longer form, so feel free to listen to this like a podcast if you want to put it on in the car. And I also just want to say, as you know, there are a lot of Jewish people in the world, so I'm just going to speak to my own knowledge and my own experience. And if you have anything you'd like to add, anything you think I've missed, if you have another way of doing things, or you think I got something wrong or off, please feel free to comment and chime in with that. Cool? Okay, so first, why did I decide to do a video about Yom Kippur? I will tell you, I just had a pretty lovely experience at work where a whole bunch of different people in different scenarios had varying, pretty positive wishes around Yom Kippur, and very clearly seemed interested in understanding more, but maybe not sure what to say. So feeling curious, but also respectful to not ask a bunch of questions. So I heard things like, I think there's a holiday coming up, but I don't really know what holiday it is. Is anyone taking the day off? And then also have fun on your PTO. And I also heard someone say, hey, it's Yom Kippur tomorrow, in a really nice way. And I think all of these, it just felt really sweet and supportive with such a positive intention. And so it's sort of within that spirit that I wanted to make this video. And so if you have an employee who's observing these holidays, or if you have a colleague who you want to be supportive of, I just thought you might be interested to know a basic overview about these holidays. No obligation at all. It's just for people who might want to feel a little bit more connected to someone they know. So that's the spirit in which I'm making this. All right, so the first question you might have is, when is Yom Kippur? And I'm going to take a minute and just talk about how the Jewish calendar works. It is a different calendar than the sort of standard, January, February, March that we have generally in the United States. And it has different months, and they are actually, those dates happen at different times each year. And so you actually would need to Google it, and I do as well. Every year I just go in and Google it to see when these holidays are. And what you'll see is typically Jewish holidays start at sundown on sort of the first night of the holiday, and then they last until sundown the next day. And so typically when this happens, people might start observing on that first night, but then the day that they would sort of take off and sort of see as that day that they are observing would be that sort of full day, which then ends at sundown on that day. Okay, so it's important to know that to fully understand Yom Kippur, you actually need to understand two holidays, and the other one is called Rosh Hashanah. These are 10 days apart. Rosh Hashanah comes first, and they are considered the Jewish high holy days. So if you hear this term, that's what people are referring to. Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year, so this is when our calendar starts over, and this one is a very happy holiday, and the typical greeting is people would say, we hope you have a sweet new year, and so there's a lot of sort of focus on joy and sweetness, and in that spirit we traditionally eat apples dipped in honey, and this sort of represents that wish for sweetness of the new year. So if you're invited to a Rosh Hashanah dinner, you could offer to bring, can I bring apples and honey? Sort of a nice thing to bring. The other thing that we traditionally eat on Rosh Hashanah is, you may know about kind of braided bread called challah, and that's something that Rosh Hashanah, people eat that challah bread. It's shaped like a circle, and it also is made with raisins, so it's sort of sweeter, and it's a very beautiful bread. Okay, so here's where Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur go together, and also where it gets a little bit more complex and reflective, and that's the idea that on Rosh Hashanah, many people participate in something called tashlich, where you would go to like a body of water, like a river or a lake, and collect rocks or leaves, and you put them you sort of cast them in the water, and you express things that you're sorry about or that you regret, things that you've done that you want to, acknowledge and sort of like let go in this way, and specifically with an intention of wanting to change that. Hey, I'm entering into a new year, and I want to change and be better, more kind, being a better person, etc. So on Rosh Hashanah, it is also said that the book of life is opened, and this is the book where all the decisions about what's going to happen to each person in the coming year is written. And on Yom Kippur, the book is sealed. And so this is honestly, and this is where it gets very, I'll say like very complex, but this is where it's basically decided like who will live and who will die in the next year. It's hard for me to characterize in a short video the complexity of this. It's not like Santa Claus, where it's like, hey, if you're good, you'll live, and if you're bad, you die. But instead, it's more just a very spiritual time to feel connected to the much bigger context that we live in. And a lot of people describe it as sort of a feeling of awe. And it's an opportunity to take a step back and really consider like the profound truth that like we live and we die, and we don't always have a lot of control in that. I would say to me, the closest feeling that I can describe is when I had when we welcomed our first child. And I remember like when he was born, I had this sort of overwhelming sort of feeling that I'd never had before, but like that being alive and not being alive are actually can be quite close together. And that's not something I think about every day. And so it sort of puts things into a very profound perspective. It's also a time to consider that like people are flawed, and the act of acknowledging our mistakes it's less a form of self-discipline, and it's rather an experience of awareness. So to sort of face this difficult reality and look inward and say like, hey, I did things that were not good. That's not good. It doesn't feel good to acknowledge that, but to look in and really face it and be like, yep, that is something that happens. And so it's really about accepting that about ourselves, again, with the intention of improving and being better and becoming, kinder people, and not doing that anymore. So truly, I am barely scratching the surface of the meaning of this holiday, but hopefully it kind of helps convey that sort of reflective nature and that spiritual nature of the holiday. You could spend decades thinking and learning about the meaning of these holidays. So, I don't want to do this an injustice by treating it lightly, but hopefully that gives a little bit of a flavor of what these mean to people. A little bit more about the fast. So on Yom Kippur, it's traditional that a lot of people fast. Again, this is the day the book of life is sealed. So this is a very like spiritually connective and reflective time on that fast. So people typically stop eating at sundown the night before. Some people just eat dinner and then don't eat after that, and then they spend the day fasting on that sort of full day. And people will say like, hey, think of the holes in your stomach, filling the holes in your stomach with thoughts and awareness of the problems in the world and the problems that we may have caused, and thinking of how we can do better. So again, the intention is not to like harm yourself. The intention is to create an opportunity for more spiritual connection. And in that line, there's actually a strict rule that if you're sick, you're not supposed to fast. So I guess what I'm trying to really capture is it's not about hurting yourself. It's about creating this sort of connection and opportunity for thoughtful reflection. Cool. So then at the end of that day, people have sort of traditionally a meal that's called a break the fast or a break fast, where they come together and have a meal that is like typically very informal, and it's also much more joyful. So people, it's sort of like the end of Yom Kippur, people come together, it's very social, and there might be like a potluck where people just kind of grab a plate and load it up and hang out and chat and eat. And that's fun. And if you're ever invited to one of these, you might bring like a plum cake. Is like a fun tradition. There's a great New York Times, I'll link to it, but there's a really great like traditional New York Times plum cake that's really good. Also like lox and bagels, great item to bring. Fruit salad. Cool. So that's sort of the 101, like high level overview. As I mentioned before, there's a tremendous amount of depth to these holidays. And I just tried to kind of give like an overview if someone's feeling curious of what it's all about. And I hope it's helpful. I think the last thing that I'll mention and leave you with is like, if there's someone at work who you think is Jewish, you don't need to force it. If they haven't mentioned that they're observing, or they haven't mentioned that they're Jewish, like you don't need to call attention or assume that they're fasting or anything like that. But if they have mentioned it, or they're taking the day off, or they've been open about it in the past, I do think it's like, I have felt very appreciative and supported when people have just said like, hey, I hope you have a good Yom Kippur. And I think that that's great. I think that's fine. So thanks so much for watching. Take care. Bye.